Hey, it's Dan again, and welcome back to Unified Gaming. Hey guys, and welcome to our video on the Elder Scrolls Online 5.1.0 Scalebreaker patch that is coming in a couple of weeks. Now this patch is due to bring obviously a change to the weapon skill lines, as well as a few classes and just some general world skills. From reading the patch notes, I feel that there's obviously going to be many changes, most of which seem relatively positive, but there are some that are obviously a bit controversial, and we're going to be looking at all of these changes from a PvP perspective, sort of drawing upon my sort of 2.5 years of PvP experience, and sort of with that out of the way, we're going to jump straight in. Now, as we scroll down, I just want to just remind people that these notes obviously have been leaked ahead of time, so just do factor that in, that obviously they were leaked, and so Source has reacted, but these are the official notes that have been published, and this video has been recorded on the 7th of the 7th, 2019. Now, with that out of the way, when we go through, there's actually 2 new dungeons, and the dungeons bring some new sets, all of which are mediocre at best for PvP, in all honesty. A couple of them will have some uses for very niche builds or very specific setups, but from reading through them, they're pretty meh. So I'm going to go through and just kind of give you a brief overview of what they are, how you may want to use it, and then you can kind of go from there yourselves. Now, our first set that's obviously coming with this patch is Hollowfang Thirst. It's a light armor set. It comes with 2 lots of crit and 1 lot of magicka. This seems as a supportive set, the 5-piece given the ability to give people both max magicka back, so restoring magicka, and also give them vitality, increasing the healing received. Now, the drawback with this set is that it has quite a long cooldown, and it's obviously got a delay with the actual sort of proc. So although the proc fires, it's then got a 2 seconds delay, at which point people might move away, and it's got quite a small radius. So I don't think this set's going to be particularly helpful in PvP. As for the medium armor set from one of the dungeons, it's Draognknight's Claws. This medium armor set is got a 2-piece that is penetration, which is very nice. Not many sets have this. The 2-piece is good, the 3-piece is a bit iffy, and the 4-piece is okay. As for the 5-piece, it's pretty useful actually. In this patch they've changed bleeds, and obviously bleeds will now take into account the target's resistance. So by having this obviously effect, increasing the damage, your weapon damage against people who have bleeds on them by 200, it's quite a good way to kind of offset the changes with the bleeds. Not bad set, sort of health, healing, taking health. With the changes to Plague Doctor and it's having its health reduced, this is now a good way to get max health, so you might want to consider this. And the 5-piece is pretty interesting. So when you obviously deal direct damage, you gain a stack of resolve for 10 seconds, and this obviously increases your healing taken and your physical and spell resist. And obviously you can gain one every second up to 8 stacks. So what's nice is this can give you quite a good piece of armor. So I might pair this with the recently released set from Elsewhere, where basically it gives you your health recovery is increased by the more resistance you have. So this might pair nicely with that. But with that said, I can't see this being used beyond tanks, and even then it's very situational, so I wouldn't worry about getting this in all honesty. Now for the monster set, I think this is a very good monster. This is a Grand Wolf. It's crit, and what I really love about this set is that it gives you obviously magicka or stamina back, and it gives you both. So if you're a magicka DPS and you critically damage somebody, you restore 1000 magicka. And on top of that you get 500 stamina, and it gives you this every 5 seconds, so it's a really good way to sustain. So you might want to run this on many magicka builds who have issues with stamina sustain, and you could then pair this kind of with the protective jewelry trait, thus giving you lots of resistance and lots of sustain, and then you free up 2 sets to kind of be damage sets, or sort of 1 damage and 1 max stats. So I think this is going to see quite a lot of use for certain builds in PvP next patch. That said, obviously this is also obviously subject to change, so just to bear that in mind. Now from the other sets that we have with this DLC, we have from the layer of Marazok, and it's Zen's Red Dress. And this is a nice magicka set. It's obviously recovery, spell damage, and magicka, so just a good all-round set. And what I really love about this set, and it's probably one of the few sets in the game that has this effect, is it increases your damage over time abilities. Now for magicka DPS, it's really hard to get damage over time in PvP that is actually viable and actually useful. Unless you play a magicka Draognknight, you're kind of limited to that. But with all of the changes to the skills and to obviously the classes themselves, weapon skill lines, and this set being introduced as well, it makes magicka dot builds so much more viable. And with that kind of said, I've actually decided a magicka dot build that I want to run next patch is a magicka Warden, and I've been running it kind of previously, and basically everything I do is just significantly buffed because of this set and also the changes to the patch, so I'm really looking forward to that. The medium armor set's not bad. It's obviously crit, stamina recovery. The crit's not particularly great though, it's hit and miss at times, but obviously when you deal damage with damage over time ability, you basically put a sort of debuff on the target at 20 stacks, so you keep doing it, the thing then explodes, dealing 11,000 damage, so it's quite a high damage. This might get nerfed slightly, but I can't see it being changed too drastically because it's got quite a hard proc chance. With that said, if you play as a stamina Draognknight, this might be a good set for you because it allows you to bleed somebody up, dot somebody up, and then once that's kind of ticking away at them, you then get given free burst built into your kind of proc set. So for sort of dot builds, sort of stamina sorcerers or stamina Draognknights, this will be very helpful. Now, as for obviously the heavy armor set, it's okay. It's not particularly great though, so it kind of seems more of a brawler type set, so giving you lots of stamina rather than health. So that's good if you want that kind of playstyle. But I wouldn't use it. It's stamina, health, and basically when you take damage from melee, you go and apply minor fracture and breach to anybody's near you. And for me, I just don't think it's worth it. There's better 5p sets in the game, so in PvP, this isn't really going to make much of a difference, if any, in all honesty. And then for the monster set, I thought this was a bit controversial, in all honesty. Now, lots of you will notice that the Magicka Necromancer and the Stamina Necromancer have this Goliath Bash, which is pretty strong, and it's been nerfed heavily recently. What they've decided to do is to make a monster set that then buffs it. So, yeah, you basically have a stamina on it, and then when you bash an enemy, you basically do 8,000 damage to them. And what makes this worse is, obviously, the more damage over time effects they have on them, more negative effects, the more damage you do with this proc. And it can occur 7 seconds. So that way, you've kind of got two sort of casts of this proc, basically, when you're in that Goliath form, and this will probably be nerfed, because I could see this basically going back to the whole AoE bash builds that the Necromancer had. So expect this to possibly change. It will be quite strong on that build. With that said, every other sort of build, it's going to be a bit mediocre. So yeah, Necromancers, yay, everything else a bit Now obviously it brings loads of collections with this sort of patch coming up, titles, and we're going to skip past those because those don't make any difference. Just a quick thing that's worth mentioning is that they've basically changed the crafting, so now you can craft multiple things at once, like enchantments, potions, and so on. So that's going to be really, really helpful if you play it on the console. And they've also changed something for the Undaunted system, which will help people in PvP. And what I really like about this is, as you get the keys, instead of having to get them stuck on one character, they go to your currency tab, which is helpful. And on top of that, you can then use the keys to buy coffers from the merchants rather than the chests. So exactly the same sort of system, but you just go to the NPC instead. But what they've added this time is you can save up 5 of those keys and actually buy a specific dungeon set. So that way, if you buy the dungeon set, say from Scalecaller Peak, you have a chance of getting the shoulders for that dungeon. So it just makes it so much easier to get the actual shoulders you want. So if you're after a Bloodspawn, speak to Madge, pay the 5 keys, you've got basically a 1 in 2 chance of getting the shoulders that you need, rather than obviously a 1 in 27 chance, for example. So it just makes it so much easier to get what you need. So yeah, this is a very welcome change for PvP, especially because you can do a couple pledges quite easily. The rest of this is just PvE stuff, so we're not really interested in that. And then they've just changed a couple of sets, which we're going to touch upon quickly, and then kind of look at the skills. Now, obviously, some of the sets changed. They've changed a lot of sets that kind of gave you that, oh no, I'm going to come back from being dead. So like Phoenix, the Eternal Warrior, and so on. So Phoenix, rather than you sort of come back from being dead, you instead get a massive shield at low health, and you do fire damage around you. And the cooldown's now 1 minute, so it's not particularly great. This won't be used, in all honesty. Martial Knowledge, again, it wasn't really used before the patch, and it's not going to be used with the changes. Basically, when you get below, when you're on 75% of the stamina, you do more light attack damage. Werewolves, maybe, but apart from that, you won't see this being used. Our next set is Elemental Succession. Again, this wasn't really used in PvP, and it won't be this patch, but basically, all they've done is that you get 500 spell damage whilst the element's active towards that element. So if you get 500 towards frost, fire, or shock damage, which is somewhat useful, and they can now stack on top of each other, so you can have a shock and fire effect going on at once. Beyond that, I don't think people are going to use this, so yeah, this will be skipped, and people just continue to use Burn and Spellweave. Now, one set that I do think is really interesting is how they change Overwhelming Surge, and I think this is pretty strong in all honesty. So, long story short, Overwhelming Surge, when you cast a class ability, it puts lightning around you and it zaps people. You can pull Nightblades out of stealth, really strong. I'm not sure if that's a bug, but that's very helpful anyway. Now, it does exactly the same thing. It's just got a higher proc chance to do that, so you can proc it more reliably. It does less damage though, but it also heals you, in the sense that it will restore your magicka. So every time you obviously cast this, you get magicka back. There's not a massive amount of magicka, but it's still magicka back. So it's basically a sustain set that also does damage. So it's quite a nice sort of change. It'll be good on Magicka Templars, particularly, who will have some sort of sustain issues if they want to go with high max magicka builds. So this is a good way to get damage, sustain, and just kind of a better all-round build. Now this set's been changed so that when you obviously cast a damage shield, you drop down the fragment still, but it just basically does more healing and does more damage to target. So that's pretty much it, and the cooldown's the same. Rather than having that proc chance, it's now a guaranteed chance, so you can control when this procs, which is really, really nice. So that's kind of that. Now for the medium sets, obviously you've got Sensuous Bite. Now this has been changed quite heavily, so some people may really like this change. But basically now when you roll dodge, you get increased critical damage. So this allows certain builds like Nightblade to get their critical damage all the way up to like 200+%. So they basically do like double damage. It's just ridiculous. So this is a good set for that. But again, there will be better sets that will outperform this. But it's very good for niche builds. So if you play a high crit build with movement, this might be for you now. As for Kyan's Kiss, basically this has been changed slightly to kind of reflect the changes to the bow skill line, which we'll go through shortly. But basically, as you use this ability, it's just more reliable. You get the heal more consistently. You also get stamina more consistently, and it only procs on bow stuff now rather than melee. So it's just a more consistent proc chance. So that's pretty much it. Not really that useful in all honesty, so I don't expect this to be seen. As for heavy armor sets, Eternal Warrior, that's been changed. So rather than you sort of turn into statue then come back alive, instead when you get really low, it just gives you a big heal like Draognknight does, and there's ultimate. I wouldn't see this being used, to be honest. You may want to pair this with Draognknight and have some stupid build where if you get really low, you just get like 30k burst heal for free. But beyond that, nah. So yeah, I don't expect this to be used. As for Immortal Warrior, that's been changed like this. So again, similar sort of thing, but this will pair very nicely on tank builds with Mark of the Pariah. So when you're below 35% health, you gain major protection, reducing all damage. So what you can do is basically run this with Mark of the Pariah. When you sit below 35% health, you'll gain about 7,000 armor from Mark of the Pariah from the 5 piece plus the 2 piece. So you get like 10k armor there minimum just from the sets without the heavy armor itself. And then you get major protection. So this basically allows for really tanky builds at low health if you pair those two together. So could be useful, but again, tanks only, so that's about it. One of the changes that's been made to 7th Legion makes it sort of better but worse in other ways. So rather than you being able to sort of fall foul of the RNG gods and hope that the set procs when you need it, you can now be proactive with it. So when you cast your armour buff, you get obviously the damage buff. The damage buff, however, has been reduced to 350, so that's 150 lost there. And you also lose the heal over time from it as well. But with that said, you do gain that back in health recovery, so there are kind of pros and cons to this change. The second thing that's really good about this is, because it's health recovery, if you pair this with something like Troll King, obviously they can then add together and then they multiply, so you'll get a massive amount of health recovery. So this health recovery will be very similar to the healing before, but you just won't notice it as much in regards to the green numbers. And obviously what's nice is that it's got a 10-second cooldown, but because you can control when it procs, you can keep this up as often as you like or as least little as you like. And it also allows you to kind of put it up before you go into the battle and be sort of buffed rather than go in and wait for somebody to hit you in order to get the buff. So it just makes it a bit more usable. Veiled Inheritance has been nerfed and it's pretty much not going to be used, sadly, this patch. Basically, when you interrupt somebody, you get 500 weapon damage, which is a load of sort of weapon damage. Problem is, you don't interrupt people in PvP too often, so that said, this is going to see a massive drop in use now. So if you are somebody running Veiled Inheritance, I would suggest going to 7th Legion, or I'd suggest going to Fury, or to Ravager, depending on if you meet the new proc requirements on Ravager. Okay? Now for Ravager, basically, before when you just did melee damage, it procced, so Templars had a really high uptime. Now it's been changed so that when you try to lower somebody's physical spell resist with Breach or Fracture, you then get Ravager proc and you get 125 damage, and this can go up 4 times, so you can go obviously up to 500 weapon damage in total. So again, if you notice, it is a nerf from the 645, so it's a nerf already. And the duration is also lower, it's only 5 seconds, but it does go up to 10 seconds once you max the stacks out. So this just means if you're not applying like fractures and stuff every 5 seconds, you're not really going to benefit from Ravager anymore. So Ravager is probably going to see a slight decline in both its use and its value, so just sort of factor that in. If you have it, get rid of it soon, because this will become pretty redundant. Houses, furnishings, when you skip past that, none of that's relevant for us. And so going down to the skills now, this is what I think is quite interesting. They've changed a couple of things with the Necromancer to try and make it more balanced and actually make it less buggy. So we're going to look at that now. So with this patch, they're trying to sort of homogenize all the skills and sort of bringing them closer to one another, so they have very similar functionality. With that said, it does mean that skills that kind of were overperforming are now sort of more in line and they're easy to compare which skills better. And it also still aims to try and keep the sort of flavour that skills have. So that's kind of what this spoiler shows. So now looking at the Necromancer and the Blast Bones, they basically tried to reduce the bugginess of this. So when it runs to the target, it will now jump on them rather than sort of stand there. but it jumps from them from a closer range. It still doesn't solve all the pathfinding issues, so blast bones may still be buggy, but it might be a little bit more reliable. So sort of just factor that in, and yeah, as you know, my Necromancer builds we use blast bones, so obviously I'm hoping this might help solve some of those issues, but other than that, it's still going to be a bit awkward to use. Boneyard's been changed. They've basically made it more expensive. They've reduced the damage, but they've made the bonus modifier go up to 50% from 20%, so that basically means when you cast it near a corpse, the damage over time will increase. I am curious, however, if this applies to the synergy. If it does, then it's going to be really, really strong. If it doesn't, then yeah, it doesn't make much difference. Generally, this is kind of a nerf on the whole. The Colossus, the standard version, has been nerfed, so basically it doesn't do as much bonus damage anymore. Mage has had a massive cost increase, and the damage has increased by 90%, but the problem still remains the same, that it costs loads of magic and stamina now, and it doesn't do a massive amount of damage, so this won't really be used too often, okay? Shock and Siphon has also been changed, so they've basically made the hitbox work properly, but they've actually removed all of the cost for them, so they're now free to use. They scale off your highest stats, so if your stamina, it will scale off your stamina stats. If it's Magicka, it will scale off your Magicka stats. And they've also decreased the damage, but they've basically made the sustain sort of free, so although it's kind of lower sustain than it used to be, it's free to use. So basically this is now your sustain tool, so very similar to like a repentance or sort of restoring ritual, those kind of skills that give you kind of just Magicka back or stamina back, kind of whatever you need. So that's kind of a nice change to help sort out the sustain that the Necromancer does have. As for Bone Tyrant, Bitter Half has been changed slightly, it's just more reliable now, and it's got a slightly increase in healing. They fixed the Goliath so it doesn't go and bug out, so you don't stay in it forever anymore. Rend Flesh, they basically made it so that the Befouled Star from your own CP tree won't apply to yourself, so that way you can't basically increase the negative effect of it on yourself, so that's nice. Again, Restoring Tether, like with the Shocking one up here, they've basically reduced the cost, so now it's completely free, and it scales off your highest stats. They've reduced the healing, sadly, and they basically made it return stamina. So if you notice, one's basically a Magicka restore, the other one's a stamina restore. And the Spirit Mend has been nerfed or buffed in the same patch, which is a bit weird. So basically they've increased the cost and increased the healing. So the cost is going to be about 90%, the healing's going to be about 90% to allow for that. And then they've basically made it heal twice as much rather than 3 times as much. But obviously when you take the morph, that obviously gives you this sort of effect intensive mender, it reduces duration in half, so basically you just get really big small heals really fast. So currently on live you're getting about 7k tooltips with the current morph, 7 to 9k anywhere. With this morph now it will probably go up to about 10k in total when you factor in the 90%. So all in all it's a slight sort of buff to its ability to heal you quickly, but obviously it's more expensive to use, so that's the only downside. Bigger heals, more expensive. Now we're down to the other class abilities, and we're kind of they've changed a few things with PvP generally. Off balance now lasts 7 seconds from 5, so it makes it easy to use, so that's nice. All bleeds, and this is quite important, all bleeds now take target's resistance into account. So this basically means that they have now become damage over times, so rather than being just OP against everything, they are going to be OP against certain things. What is unclear is whether this is going to be against targets with high resistance or low resistance. So what I understand from looking at it, it seems that basically people who have high resistance will take less damage from bleeds, and thus you need to use Oblivion damage, which is kind of hinted at towards here. So this is going to be good against kind of people who have low resistance. It's just another dot now rather than a sort of unmitigatable source of damage. Few bug fixes here, nothing particularly great. They basically just try to make a sort of a rule set for how dots work now and abilities generally. So that's kind of, this is their rule, and then they're going to kind of go through and sort of talk about a couple changes of this animations too. But they've made a rule set that everybody's going to have to follow to try and make the skills easier to understand. They've made a couple of skills that are kind of like considered really strong ultimates, such as Dawnbreaker, Deathstroke, Soul Shred, etc. And they basically just made it so that they have a cast time or an animation that has to play somewhat. So rather than being able to tap Dawnbreaker and tap block and then it just fires straight away, you now have a 400 milliseconds, so just under half a second for it to actually play an animation. So with that meaning you kind of just have less burst potential than you would have currently, but in the same token you have slightly more control, because if you tap the ability and then hit block, you don't end up using it, so it means that you can control when it fires. So if you accidentally hit it, you can hit block and go, oh no, I didn't mean to do that. But generally this is a nerf. They've improved your CC break, apparently. I don't know how true that is. They've just fixed issues with damage over times. fixed issues with skills, not scaling properly. So now Thaumaturge works properly. Pets now get the 5,000 health from Battle Spirit, and also are healed for that at the start, rather than just having the 5,000 health and no sort of heal, and they have to regenerate themselves. Fixed issues with AoEs not actually rendering properly, so they now do. And then they've just changed cost reductions, so that cost reductions are now all multiplicative. So what that means is, if you had, say, 10% cost reduction and then 20% cost reduction, rather than add them together to be 30%, if your 10% came first and you had the 20%, you get 10% flat, and you get plus 20% off 10%. So you basically take 10%, times it by 0.2, and then add them together. So we give you like 12% basically. So this just means it's easy to understand if you're trying to sort of work in it from a build or theory sort of crafter's perspective. And then they've basically made it so that skills that use health to scale will now take the correct critical strike chance. So if you're a tank and your highest critical strike chance is stamina, then you'd obviously use stamina, and if it's magicka, you'd use your magicka one. And obviously this is quite a common change throughout the patch, which you'll notice that all heals kind of respect the right kind of crit. So if you're a stand build, you can still actually use some of the heals now and not be penalised for where you were before. Precise Strike now works properly, and then Oblivion damage has been changed slightly. So Oblivion damage basically now bypasses armour like it did before, but it's now got a cap, and it's a percentage. So the higher the target's health, the more damage it does basically. So they can do up to 4,875, which is quite a lot of damage. With that kind of sort of process done, they've obviously changed Slodes and Night Slayer to kind of also update to reflect this sort of change. Slodes basically seen a buff against tanks, so if you want to fight tanky targets now, use Slodes. You can do up to 3,000 damage per tick, which is insane, considering how often it ticks. And Night Slayer is very similar again, it can do up to 8,000 damage in total. But obviously, as mentioned, obviously these scale with the target's max health, so the higher their max health, the more they do. The lower their max health, the less they do. So if you are using Oblivion glyphs on your sort of weapons, and then you are sort of fighting general damage dealers, so people with 20 to 24k health, this might be a slight nerf for you. So just sort of bear that in mind, okay? Just a couple bug fixes, and lifesteal now also takes again that critical strike chance that we mentioned earlier. As for changes to the classes, they've obviously changed Draognknight, so they've basically reduced the cooldown on the sustain passive combustion to make it 2 seconds, not 5, so you basically get more sustain. But because of all the cost increases from all the skills, it kind of equals it out, so there's no real change there, to be honest. Now they've changed Fiery Breath, so Fiery Breath is now a little bit more expensive, and it does less damage over time, so it's more of a debuff rather than a dot. So that's kind of something just to sort of factor in. You're going to see slightly less damage from that this patch, and it's going to be more expensive to use. As for Lava Whip, they've obviously kept that the same, and then they've changed Mortal Whip, the morph that gives you the extra spell and weapon damage. And basically, rather than giving you 125, it's now 75, so it's a 50 reduction on each one, so it's basically 150 reduction in total before you take into the 20% from obviously major sorcery or major brutality. So this is obviously a nerf. Cost is exactly the same. As for the Syrian Strike, they've basically fixed some issues with it, but they've also increased the cost, and it's had about an 800 increase, which is quite a big increase. But they've also increased the damage per tick of the dot to try and offset that, so although it costs more, it does a little bit more damage. I'm not particularly fond of that change personally, because I think it just Draognknights have issues with sustain anyway, so this isn't going to help. As for Ash Cloud, they basically just reduced the healing in total and just made it more expensive to use by quite a bit. So this is going to be used less than it used to be used, so that's the thing now. It wasn't used often anyway, but now there's no real reason to use it, just run a different heal. Petrify has been changed heavily. This has had a massive increase, so 1100 increase. And they've also had the cost reduction has also gone from it. So now when it levels up, it just gets more damage. So this will do more damage than it did, but it costs significantly more. And they've also reduced the range as well by 1 meter. So that means you can now roll dodge away from it, and most of the time you'll be away from the target, so you won't be able to hit with Fossilize during a roll dodge if you're quick enough, which is quite nice. They've also made the hill from the morph actually be a little bit bigger, so that's nice. And that's kind of the Draognknight. So the Draognknight generally is basically just seeing issues with sustain sort of amplified, and the damage over time builds kind of reduced on the whole. So generally it's kind of nerfs for the Draognknight on the whole, sadly, this patch. So they won't be as damagey as they used to be. Now for the Nightblade, again, they've kind of similar sort of theme as the Draognknight. They've had quite a few nerfs this patch, sadly. They've reduced the mitigation from Grim Focus, so now it's only up to 10%, not 15%. But they have fixed the bug that if you went to fire it and it didn't fire properly, it would still use the sort of projectile and stuff, so that's kind of been fixed apparently. So yeah, that's a nerf there, sadly. they've changed the mark target, which has been a nerf in effect, but not. So basically, they've now made it so that the debuff for your armour is now 1 effect rather than 3. So the downside with this is that now when you try to debuff somebody, they have 1 thing to get rid of rather than 3. So against a Templar, this is quite annoying because they have obviously a cleanse that removes 5 things. So this just indirectly nerfs it basically. And you can't also cast it on pets anymore. So by casting it on pets to get that, if the target dies conditional, it gives you that extra damage. That doesn't work anymore. So you can only get that on players now. So on the whole, it's a slight nerf, but nothing drastic in all honesty. So don't worry about that too much. So yeah, Lotus fan has seen the nerf this patch. The damage over time has been reduced by 22%, so it's just a nerf overall. Concealed weapons had a bug fix. Twisted Paths had its damage reduced. The heal obviously have had its damage increased slightly, so that's kind of that really. So buff to the heal, nerf to the actual damage version of it. As for Summon Shade, they've increased the cost of this by 1,350, so just a massive increase. So that's going to make it hard to justify running the skill anymore, especially if it's still buggy. They haven't said whether it's fixed or not, but it's Source, so I don't feel too hopeful, sadly. So if you're a Magical Nightblade and you're obviously watching this and you see this change, you may want to consider running something else instead. Okay. As for the Dark Shade version of it, basically the little person that runs up to the other people, he does less damage. So again, that's also another nerf. So yeah, not particularly great. And then as for siphoning, they've changed Drain Power, which is quite nice. I like this. It's a very thematic change. So rather than giving you major sorcery, as you use it, it reduces the damage of your targets. It does say weapon damage. I'm curious if that is just weapon or if it's weapon and spell damage. So that's going to be... I'm a bit curious to see what that actually means. I hope it's both. And if it is, then great. And if it's not, then it's going to be, again, situational. And it might not be used beyond people running AoE builds or bomb builds. So bomb build, you may want to use this, but there are other options, remember. As for Cripple, so Cripple's obviously had a cost reduction, which is nice, so it's a little bit cheaper, and it's also had a damage increase. So that's something, I guess. So basically, the Nightblade on the whole, it's had nerfs. Nothing drastic in all honesty, just a bit of survivability nerfing. And they've had a little bit of damage nerfing, but they've had a little bit of damage increase from Cripple. So swings and roundabouts. But yeah, nothing too drastic. Okay. Sorcerer has been buffed in some parts and nerfed in other parts, so we're going to go through that now. You'll find that most of the changes to Sorcerer actually affect the Magic Sorcerer and not the Stamina Sorcerer, which is nice, because Stam Sorcerer is nowhere near as strong as Magic currently. But they basically changed it so that the Crystal Frags, they've been nerfed but then buffed, so basically there's kind of 2 real distinctions now. The Crystal Blast is the AoE morph without a doubt, there's no getting away from that now. The Crystal Frag is the skill that you use to do the actual damage. They've actually reduced the damage by 10% on the base skill, and they've also reduced the cost, which is nice. So it makes sustaining a bit easier as a sorcerer, so that's really, really helpful. But by reducing the damage here, they've actually increased it up here by 13%. So overall, depending on where they sort of rank that damage increase, this could be a potential buff to the damage if you use the proc only. So if you play like a sort of a clench build or a reach build, but that might not be viable this patch. So yeah, this might be a slight buff, but it'll be very similar to what it is now, just cheaper to use. The shields have been changed heavily this patch. On the whole, everything's been nerfed, so shields are now smaller and they're more expensive. So if you're playing as a Magicka Sorcerer, you will find that your shield is going to be compared to that of Harness Magicka in the cost. So you're going to kind of have to decide which to use or whether you use both. So yeah, they're just quite expensive to use now, and they also have a lot less sort of size. So they're kind of trying to make them sort of comparable to a burst heal, similar to like the Templars Honor the Dead or Breath of Life. Now for me, I don't like that change personally, because I think that obviously a burst heal outweighs a shield, because the burst heal takes you out of execute range and a shield does not. So if they were to change that so that if you have the shield on, your execute modifier can't be applied, if that would take you beyond the 25% or the 50% depending on which one it is, then I think that'll be fair. But otherwise, I think this is just a general flat nerf across the whole. And yeah, just massive cost increase, less shield, so kind of not that great in all honesty. Fixed rebate a little bit, nothing drastic there. They've decreased the damage of the Familiar, the cost rate on the Familiar by 700, so it's cheaper to kind of use the skill. And they've increased the damage as well, but they've reduced its tick by 3%. So all in all, it's going to be doing almost identical damage to it. It's just cheaper to use. Again, another sustained buff, so that's going to help Pet Sorks in Battlegrounds particularly, so kind of you can rejoice. As for the clan fear, they've just reduced the heal from that, so if you're running that, it's not particularly great for PvP in all honesty. PvE is somewhat useful, but yeah, so that's just had a nerf basically. Now the Twilight has been nerfed heavily this patch, so it's had a massive damage reduction, and just generally it's just not as good. So because of that, you're going to find it harder to warrant running it, and now it's more this is a hill, or that's really it. The damage is so low, it's not really worth doing it. It's a 69% damage reduction if you want to know that. And they've also made sure that the kick and the zap are also the same damage, just so it's for sort of keeping it nice and consistent. They've also made a bolt escape, make it so that it actually stuns the enemy always now, so there's nothing to worry about there. And they've also buffed again the movement eye, which again I did not see that coming, so that's quite nice. But basically, when you use bolt escape, you get fatigue, and this will now reduce that fatigue so you can cast it more frequently. So yeah, that's pretty strong. Overload has been changed, and it's basically been fixed. So before, if the target was off balanced, you didn't really get the 70% bonus damage. So meaning if you can set the target off balance and then heavy attack with it, it's going to do so much more damage. I see this as an issue with vampires. So if you run the vampire feed, savage feeding I think it's called off the top of my head, and you then feed on the target with the passives in the vampire skill line, that forces them off balance. You can then use this to get 70% more damage on your overload. So I think this is really, really strong, and this will be horrible in duels, so just look out for that. People will be doing this in duels most likely. Lightning Splash has been changed, it's just cheaper to use, but you don't really use it in PvP, so there's nothing too drastic there. Templar has been buffed on the whole, in all honesty. So kind of when you look at the Sorcerer, that's been buffed for sustain generally. Templar's been buffed for sustain. Draognknight's been nerfed. Nightblade's been nerfed so far. The Warden you'll see has been nerfed somewhat, and you'll see that the Necromancer has been kind of just fixed somewhat. So for the Templar, they basically just made the jabs a little bit cheaper to use, so sustain buff there. They've reduced the cost of shards, sustain buff there. But they've reduced the damage because it's meant to give resources, so it makes more sense now. It's more of a utility rather than a damage skill. They've also increased the duration of minor protection from the passive, so this is obviously a massive buff. So it means that you can now get away without having to use something like Temporal Guard on your back bar. So this is just way more reliable. So again, Templar's going to become a little bit more tanky, so cheaper skills and tanky already. And then this skill, Dawn's Wrath in the Eclipse, this is completely broken. Completely broken now, I'm telling you that right now, okay? Eclipse, they basically reworked it, so it's now a debuff to your target that they can't get rid of unless they purge it. So before you could CC break Total Dark or those Eclipse morphs, now you are stuck with it. So what happens is, target hits you with Eclipse. First time you hit them back, you get a snare on you for 30%. You hit them again, you get entangled, which immobilizes you. You hit them a third time, then you get CC stunned. So that just means that you get stunned, which is horrible. And this can occur every second. So you kind of have two options to counterplay. You get hit with Eclipse, you then have to wait 2 seconds before you heal, or before you attack them again, sorry. Meaning that way when you hit them for second 3, you get this one, and second 2 you get immobilized. And on second 4, you won't be CC'd because the effect would have worn off. There's very little counterplay to this so far. Okay? Not enough people can afford to run the cleanse skills, they're just too expensive, unless you're a Templar. As for the Total Dark morph, this is ridiculous, in all honesty. Long story short, you basically put the ball on you this time, which protects you. Anytime you get hit, you heal. And the target is immobilized. It doesn't say there's a target cap. It doesn't say how big the heal is, but looking at the heal, it seems to be in line with what it was before. But it's been nerfed by 25%, but they've increased it so it's every half second. So although the heal was smaller, you get more heals, thus you're probably going to have more healing overall. This, as I said, if it doesn't have a target cap, it's going to be pretty strong, because you could obviously proc this multiple times. I'm hoping there is a cooldown of 1 second and a target cap. Otherwise, this is just ridiculous. And even with that sort of 1 second cooldown, if it is, and a target cap, it's still going to be horrible in duels, because when the person has this up, they basically lock you in place. They can run away and they heal. It's just stupid. No counterplay whatsoever. As for the unstable core, it's very similar to Eclipse, but it just does damage to target. And the further through the sort of debuff that they're in, the more damage they take per hit. So kind of similar to the old Total Dark that you would have seen. They've then obviously changed Solar Flare ever so slightly. They've just increased the damage, and the Solar Barrage, they've just basically made the AoE part of it do less damage per tick, because they've made AoEs on the whole be for hitting loads of people, sort of doing medium damage, where a single target is obviously one person, lots of damage. Sunfire, again, they've just reduced the cost, again, another sustain buff. They've also increased the damage of the dot, so that's more damage, but they've reduced the initial hit. So overall, Vampire's Bane and stuff, this is now going to be cheaper to use and do more damage over time. So this is again another buff to the Templar. As for the Restoring Light, the Backlash, so if you use up Purifying Light, they've basically reduced the heal from this to 29%. By 29%, with the idea thinking that this is obviously a utility skill rather than a heal skill, so it shouldn't have strong heals, which makes sense, but again, that's not particularly noticeable because people didn't really take advantage of that. As for Cleansing Ritual, they basically increased the hidden tick of this by 95%, which seems really strong on paper, but when you look at the rest of the changes, it makes sense. Although it heals you for more tick, they can only hit you every 2 seconds rather than every 1. So that basically means that before it was ticking and obviously hit you every single second, now it hits you every 2 seconds, so you get double the heal. So there's no real change there other than it's just every 2 seconds, but they have changed the cost by 500, so this is a bit more expensive. And then obviously they've changed the damage version of this, so that way it just does more damage, and the heal is kind of the damage is in line with the heal. So what the heal would have been, the damage is that kind of amount. So again, nothing too drastic there in all honesty, other than the cost increase. And then Restoring Aura, they've just fixed a bug there. And then Rush Ceremony, they fixed a bug there as well. Overall for Templar, you can see that as you go through, pretty much all of it's just been massive buffs. So Templar's been heavily buffed, so I would not be surprised if you see more Magicka Templars, particularly because they have a very well-rounded kit. And in all honesty, are one of the stronger classes if built right and played right, but if they're played badly, they are really bad. With that said, we're going to go to the Warden now and kind of look at kind of what's been changed here and kind of how that might affect how they're played so far. So for the Warden, I play Magic Warden pretty much exclusively on Xbox. I really enjoy it, and it's generally just been nerfed but buffed in different ways. Stamina Warden has also been changed slightly, but nothing drastic in all honesty. They've also changed Growing Swarm and made it actually more useful now, so now it can start to infect other people from 0 rather than when there's 6 people there, so that's somewhat useful and is now more reliable than it once were. As for Green Balance, they've just changed Nature's Grasp, so that's the skill that pulls you to the target, and that basically is now not as good as it used to be. And they've also made the burst version of that give you a smaller burst heal as well, so generally that's a nerf there on the whole. So Swarm's been buffed but had a nerf in regards to cost, but generally this is a buff. Species have been nerfed and Bear's been fixed. As for Winter's Embrace, Arctic Wind's been buffed slightly, so now it just gives you a slightly bigger heal. They've fixed the synergy, and then Paling Shards had a massive increase, and they've also had a damage increase for the tanking skill line, and the tank version of it, but the magic damage version of it actually has had a damage decrease. So if you're a damage dealer using Winter's Revenge, you've had a nerf, and if you're a tank using the Paling Shards, you've had a buff. Now this is where all the really interesting stuff is, because obviously this patch is focused particularly on weapon skill lines and kind of just general skill lines that aren't related to classes, so like world skills and so on. So we're going to go through, and I'm going to spend more time on this than I did on the other part, just talking about the things that are really, really important or really noticeable from my experience having played PvP for about 2.5 years now. Okay, first change is Berserk Strike. This is going to be really strong in its current form. Basically, when you hit the target, they obviously get all their armor reduced to 0 when you hit them, so it bypasses the armor and it just hits them ridiculously hard. They've now decided to make it an AoE attack, so as soon as you hit target 1, anybody around target 1 within 5 meters will get hit as well. It doesn't specify whether the AoE part of it is also going to ignore the armor as well, or whether it's going to just take the same value and then be reduced by the other person's armor. So that's something, but I do expect this to be relatively strong because it is quite a strong ult as it is. They've changed Onslaught, so if you are somebody who plays a Magicka Nightblade or Stamina Nightblade and you like to gank people, this isn't for you anymore, sadly. So when you kill people, you don't get the refund anymore, so you have to keep regenerating the ultimate, and you have to do it yourself now rather than just keep going again and again and again. But what happens is, rather than hitting the target and gaining loads of physical and spell resistance equal to the damage done, you now gain in penetration. So this is a really nice ult because it frees up things like Magicka Nightblade, that you could actually run a 2H and be a melee Magicka Nightblade, because this is a really good morph, because obviously it will bypass armor, so you don't need to worry about having penetration, and then obviously it gives you loads of penetration because obviously you would hit them really hard, which would then buff all your consecutive damage. So this is quite a nice skill if you're a Magicka Nightblade to consider using now, if you don't want to run something like a Soul Harvest. With that said, we're going to go down to Cleave now. As for cleave, they've kind of just kept that the same, other than just making it less effective, so it does 9% less damage overall, but that's obviously in total, so it's not a massive damage drop there, but a little nerf. For critical charge, this has seen quite a few changes. The Morph Crit Rush basically had a damage increase, so that's nice. So if you use Crit Rush, then obviously you're going to enjoy this change, more damage. If you are somebody who uses Stampede, however, you will not like this change. It no longer snares enemies, but is now an AoE when you hit the target. So you hit the target and you do an AoE all around them, and it's based around the damage over time. And the damage that happens is an AoE, and it's an AoE dot, but it doesn't specify whether it's an AoE dot that applies to the ground or to the floor. With how it's kind of worded down here, it's probably going to apply to the ground in all honesty. So I'll be double checking that in PTS, but I would expect that this won't be used as often as this now, because people ran Stampede just for the snare in all honesty, and I don't think people are going to run it for the AoE component. Finally, people have a reason to run Executioner now. It now goes up to 400% rather than 350, so there's a big difference between Reverse Slice and Executioner. So if you're somebody playing solo, Executioner will be your friend. If you play in groups, Reverse Slice will still be king. With that said, I can't see people changing their skills from one to the other drastically in all honesty, but I do expect to see Executioner rise in popularity, because obviously this extra scaling is going to be quite noticeable. As for heavy weapons, the Axe Blade is now every 1 second rather than every 2, so it's now just a little bit more damage overall. And for momentum, they've basically made the duration of this less than it used to be. It's a little bit cheaper to use, which is good, so that's the buff there. They've then obviously taken away the heal, so that's obviously a nerf to survivability somewhat, but that's going to get offset by the inclusion of major evasion. So by obviously having major evasion, this obviously then allows the stamina user, the person who runs this skill, to become more tanky against other groups or against Zergs. So this is a really good way to kind of help counter ball groups. So that's just a really nice change. But obviously I don't like not having that little hill over time. Forward momentum, rather than as it does it, rather than kind of doing what it used to do with it ranks up, it now just reduces the cost. So rather than increasing the duration of the immunity, it just reduces the cost. And then rally, they've changed how this heal works. So you still get exactly the same amount of heal that you would before, but the difference is it's not as quick. So before you'd obviously be able to get to about 70% and have the maximum heal already achieved. Now you need to get to 20 seconds. So all in all, you're going to find that this is actually a nerf towards rally into the big burst heal that stamina DPS is used to. So I'm going to find, like, as in a magical Nightblade or stamina Nightblade or any kind of stamina user, stamina Nightblade Warden and so on, using this, you're going to probably change this and use Vigor, because it's a lot better than it used to be. Uppercut has been changed as well. For Uppercut, they've basically reduced the cast time, and they've also reduced the cost as well. So the cast time is now 0.8 of a second, so a little bit faster. The cost is also about 500 cheaper, so that's nice. And they've also increased the damage, so kind of big sort of buffs for Uppercut there. And then Dizzy and Swing, they've made it so that when it levels up, it doesn't increase in damage. Instead, it just increases the stun, because that's the focus of the morph. So again, this has just been changed, and this has just generally been a buff. So you can see so far, the weapons skill line for 2H has been kind of buffs and nerfs throughout, but on the whole, it's nothing too dramatic. One-handed shield, however, has been quite dramatic. Now, as for defensive posture, this has been changed quite considerably. It's now a damage shield. It lasts 6 seconds only from 30, so that's a big nerf in duration. It does, however, give you a 30% shield based on your health, so this is quite nice for tanks and PvP, or for some stamina users, but I would use it on tanks mainly. They've also made it able to reflect once, but it can reflect any type of projectiles. You can reflect arrows or spells, which is always useful. They have taken away the passive abilities this skill used to give, like the increased amount of damage you can block and also block cost reduction, and they have now been moved into the morphs directly. Defensive stance, obviously this now doesn't stun them anymore, but instead it introduces that passive that they lost, so when you have it, you get 10% in block mitigation, and you can also have 10% cost reduction too. As for Absorb Magic, it's now called Absorb Missile, and does pretty much what it did before, but it reduces the damage. The shield is reduced down to 30%, and it increases the heal granted from it. So when you get hit, you heal yourself from any kind of projectile now rather than spells. So it's going to proc more frequently, basically. But obviously, bear in mind it's only 6 seconds because of the changes to the base skill itself. As for Fortress, this has been changed. It's now obviously had the cost reduction kind of in line with other stamina skills, so now it's kind of just balanced somewhat. Low Slash has just had its damage cut completely, and it's also had its snare taken away and moved to one of the morphs, so that's a bit iffy. Heroic Slash has obviously been buffed in regards to the duration of Heroic Slash. It now lasts longer, so another 3 seconds, so that's more alt gen. But obviously there's a lot less damage, so that's obviously a 31% reduction there. And then Deep Slash, again, this has also been changed, so now it hits anybody in an AoE, so it's an AoE rather than 2 people. And it does the same amount of damage to any person rather than just one person, and then a little bit less to other people. And this also keeps the 30% snare. Now it doesn't say if the snare's on all the people hit or whether it's on the target that you actually casted the skill on. I would imagine it's on the target that you casted the skill on, and then other people just take damage. Otherwise that would be a little bit strong. As for Power Bash, has been changed quite heavily now, and this is now the spammable of the skill line, which makes it me feel a little bit uneasy because it seems a bit weird to be bashing a shield. It reminds me of the Goliath bash that people have been running as of late. So for this, they've taken away the stun because obviously it's a spammable, so stun should not be spammables. They've increased the damage, and it's almost double damage. They've reduced the cost, so cheaper to use and more damage, no longer stuns. They've also taken away the Defile as well. So before this had a Defile which was really, really strong. Okay, so Reverberating Bash doesn't have the Defile, but it does keep the stun. So if you want the stun, you go with the Bash. It's a Reverberating Bash. The downside with this is it does have an issue with some of the damage. The damage will be adjusted, so it will be halved, which is not as good. So just sort of bear that in mind. With that said though, if the target is CC immune, they will not take the half damage, will take the full damage, so you can still use it as a spammable, but just bear in mind that if you stun them, you would do less damage on the stun hit. As for Power Slam, I like this change. It's quite a good sort of thematic change, it kind of makes sense. So basically as you hold block, you build up some sort of stacks when you are taking damage. And then when you bash somebody, or you cast a skill basically, you then release all those stacks doing bonus damage. So you can go up to an extra 50% damage if you have this morph, which obviously, as this is spammable, doing about 8,000 damage. For sort of most spammables go from 8 to 12k. 50% on top could go anywhere from sort of 14 to 17k. So this is quite a nice morph and is very sort of good for burst. As for Puncher, as I said, they've obviously changed a lot of the skills and just nerfed them generally. They've reduced the cost, which is nice, but they've also reduced damage. So you can't use this as spammable anymore, it's just had a 37% nerf, so the damage will be way too low as a actual spammable. They have, however, increased the duration of Fracture, and then obviously you can keep the morph that gives you Breach, so pierce armour, and then Ransack obviously doesn't give you any ward or resolve anymore, it gives you minor protection, which is really strong. So this is kind of a buff indirectly, but also a nerf because of the damage. So if you play as a stamina DPS and you use Sword and Shield, you might want to use this for minor protection, which you can switch to your front by keeping the buff on still. Whereas if you use the Temporal Guard for the minor protection in the back bar, you only have it on the back bar. So this could potentially make you a little bit more tankier than you would otherwise have been in the past. And then Shield Charge, again, that's been changed. They basically increased the shield size by 25%. And then the invasion bit, they basically reduced the maximum bonus to stun by 50%, so it doesn't stun you for as long, so it's down to about 6 seconds now. So all in all, for Sword and Shield, that's been changed sort of on and off a bit, but on the whole, you can see it's generally nerfs damage. So if you use Sword and Shield as a damage dealer in PvP for actual damage, you're going to find you're hitting a lot less, and you'll probably be forced to use a 2H up here, or the dual wield, or a bow. So now looking at that dual wield, we have got obviously a few changes here. So dual wield, obviously they changed Blade Cloak, and now it's an AoE damage over time ability, and it just a lot less, 8 seconds, so nerf there, but buff with the cost. It's now cheaper to use, so nerf to the duration but cheaper to use. That said, it doesn't last as long, so you can have to cast it more frequently, so it's generally a sustained nerf overall if you keep this up all the time. They've obviously decreased the damage per tick by 5%, but they've increased the frequency, so again, the damage will be similar with how they've changed this, but all in all it's generally a nerf because of the cost and so on. A quick cloak has been changed though, so it gives you 4 seconds of expedition. Now it would also extend it to 10 seconds. So basically this just means that you can have obviously a lot more movement speed than you did before, which is lovely. As for Deadly Cloak, this obviously doesn't deal increased damage per hit, but instead deals damage every second, so this is more for more sustained damage and used as a proper damage over time, whereas this one's more for mobility and utility. So if you play stamina characters and you want movement speed, Quick Cloak is a really good way to get it now, and I'd see a lot of people use that. I can't see many people using Deadly Cloak because it's not really used for its damage over time abilities. Heavy attacks have been fixed, so they don't pull you out of stealth. Hidden Blade's been changed slightly. This is a utility. I can't see people using this drastically. It's really expensive now, so it's had a massive increase. It's had its range reduced, and also it's had its damage reduced. This ability does interrupt people though when they are casting an attack. Again, you don't really notice this too much, so that's not going to be particularly helpful. and it doesn't give you major brutality instantly, but instead you have to hit the target with the skill and then light attack them in order to gain that major brutality. So it's a bit harder to proc the damage from the skill compared to how it used to be on live. As for Shrouded Daggers, this obviously doesn't deal any increased damage per hit, but it can interrupt any target. So currently it interrupts one target, this can now interrupt any target, so there's no change there. And each enemy hit, it does obviously AoE damage, so that it kind of just hits, it makes the damage more equal basically, so it's not variable anymore. And then for Fly on Blade, this is almost like a gap closer now, so when you cast it, it gives you the ability to teleport to the person you casted it on, so a bit like an ambush or Lotus Fan. And when you do this, it also gives you the major brutality. So if you want to play as a stamina DPS, like a stamina sorcerer, and you need to have a gap closer that you want, this is obviously another option that you can now use. So that's quite a nice change there. So right, they've obviously changed the size of this, so it's a little bit bigger. Doesn't make much of a difference. They've made it a conal if you take the Morph Thriving Chaos, so a bit like Dawnbreaker. It also reduces the damage, and it doesn't have that damage scaling like it used to. So generally, if you use Thriving Chaos, that's a nerf, other than the fact that it's got a really long sort of cone like Dawnbreaker or the shulks on the Warden. So there's kind of, that's really that. It hits more people in front of you rather than around you, but less damage. As for the Twin Blade and Blunt passive, this now ticks every second rather than every 2. So as a result, this means you get more damage per second overall, and it's about a 24% damage increase. And then for Twin Slashes, they've increased the damage of this by 37%. So as you can see, lots of bleeds throughout this patch has been really increased because obviously now they take resistance into account. So on the whole, Dual Wield has been kind of changed somewhat, but it's pretty similar to where it is. So if you are running Dual Wield, don't worry too much. I'd kind of recommend keep doing what you're doing basically. There isn't anything to worry about yet. As for the bow, this has been changed more, so you may want to consider changing some of your skills in the bow to kind of reflect the new proposed changes and try and make the most of them. For the bow, Poison Arrow has been changed. It's now got a cost increase, which is bad, so that's a nerf there. It also does less initial damage, so that's another nerf, but they have increased the damage over time by 78%. But when you read the change to Poison Injection, it's actually a nerf. So Poison Arrow in the whole has actually been nerfed on the whole. The execute focus or effect from Poison Injection is now only up to 100% rather than 260. So obviously when you add on that 160% there, that's obviously significantly less than this. Even when they multiply together, you're going to get less damage overall. So Poison Injection has been nerfed, and you won't be able to do the light attack Poison Injection combo to kind of poke people and do some damage into them. So that's just not great there if you play as a Nightblade or a bow user. Venom Arrow, they've just changed it so it does a little bit more damage to kind of offset the lack of the damage here, but nothing particularly useful there. So Poison Injection will still be used over Venom Arrow, but as I said, it has been nerfed. As for Rapid Fire, so the ultimate, that's obviously been nerfed, but buffed in other ways. So they've reduced the time, but to obviously help sort that out, they've actually increased the damage. So damage is up, but the time's less. So all in all, that's actually a slight buff. They've obviously reduced the damage over time delay, so as soon as you start casting it does damage straight away, which is nice. And then Blister, they've actually reduced the duration by half a second, and then they fixed an issue where it doesn't sort of dip as like it used to, and it was double dipping. As such, you will now have a slight damage decrease. So all in all, Toxic Barrage will get a buff, Rapid Fire will get a buff, Ballista will get a nerf. I'll still run them though, they're way better than Soul Assault, especially with the changes that's happened this patch. Now Scattershot has been nerfed heavily, and I'm quite pleased to see this because I see so many people just spam it currently now. It's quite frustrating to fight against. So basically it's just more expensive. It's had about an 800 increase. It does 10% less damage. You can't hit people as far away, and the knockback is slightly large, which is also frustrating because if you're a stamina user and you hit somebody with a knockback, you don't really want them to be knocked back in all honesty, rather than stunned on the floor so you can get to them. So this just makes it harder to gap close into people, so it's more get away from me if you play as a bow user. So this is more for your range play now, rather than kind of like hit people and then run into them, because you knock them back too far and then they'll get back up by that point. As for Magnum shots, they've basically changed this so it doesn't knock them back, but instead it deals more damage. So if you want to use this as a kind of, I want to use it as a spammable, this can now become a spammable. That said, it's not really worth it. There's other skills that would be better. And then Draining Shot's been buffed. So when you cast the skill now, as soon as you hit the target, you get healed rather than them having to CC break or get knocked back. And you also have the heal kind of decrease. So it's been nerfed, kind of the size of the heal has been nerfed, but the fact that it applies more frequently and it's easy to get quickly when you need it is kind of buffed there. So it's kind of buffed and nerfed. So I wouldn't worry too much about this, but because of these changes up here, Draining Shot has been nerfed indirectly, sadly. But I said, if you fight against it and you don't like it, that's good. If you use it, it's going to be a sort of nerf for yourself, sadly. Snipe's been buffed for some reason, so they feel obviously the snipe isn't doing as well as it could do, and obviously hitting people with 13 to 15k arrows is not okay, and it needs to be higher. So that's what snipe has had done this patch. So that would be fun to see. Volley it's not really a PvP skill, but it's just been changed, so it now just fires and does damage every second rather than every half second, and it's just a bit cheaper to use, but it does less damage overall. So yeah, overall less damage on volley, and that's the same for the Wall of Elements as well. Now the big change, which I think is very controversial for magic users, is the Destruction Staff changes, particularly the Destructive Touch, and I'm not particularly happy with this because it doesn't really solve any issues that some classes have, and I think this needs addressing in PTS. If you play as a Magical Warden or as a Magical Necromancer, especially a Magical Necromancer, you have no stun or no reliable stun that's for PvP. So this is not great. They've basically reduced the cost of this and made it into a damage over time ability, so a dot. And they've increased the damage over time by 167% to make it a proper dot. So before, if you've used it, you'd get anywhere from 6 to 9,000 on your dot. Now this will go anywhere from, you're looking about 14 to 17k dot. So this is going to be quite a large increase into the damage over time ability proportion of it, or aspect of it. With that said though, it doesn't really take into account your staff that you're using anymore, so it just does the same thing. I don't know if the animation will be different, but it doesn't actually have any special effects. You can obviously gain those back with a morph, and it does gain more damage per hit, but they've reduced the range. So they've made it cheaper to use. It's now a dot, so it's not spammable like it used to be. And yeah, so I'm not particularly happy with this because it's more of a dot, and it doesn't have the stun anymore. Now, in order to get the stun back, I think this is a typo by the way, you need to obviously have the opposite morph of Destructive Reach. I forget what it's called now off the top of my head, but the one that basically takes into account the staffs and gives them extra functionality. So you use that one, and basically you reintroduce the stun from clench, but the problem is they're 15 meters. So having your stun at 15 meters is going to be a massive nerf to most classes, because obviously as you play as a magic user, you use your stun to keep people away, and if gap closes are 22 meters, you have to be too close to them, and if you stun them, you have to run away. They can just gap close as soon as they get up. So this is going to be really awkward to use. So I don't see many people wanting to run this next patch in all honesty, and most sorcerers, if you're a sorcerer, will probably run Rune Cage, or you probably use like Elemental Weapon and just avoid having the CC altogether. So there's that. Then as for the Destructive Reach, this just obviously increases the range, so it goes back to its 28 meters, and it also reduces the cost, so you basically have a really good dot, really far range, and it's cheap to use. So as a dot build, if you're playing like a Magical Warden as a dot build, which I want to make now, this will be really good. The downside is that if you play any other build outside of a Magical Warden dot build, this is really bad. So yeah, this will probably, I can see this being changed. I don't know how they're going to change it, but I reckon they're going to probably increase this to maybe 18 meters, and I reckon that with the clench and stuff, they'll probably put those effects just back into the base skill like it was, but maybe reduce this dot damage and have that as this morph down here. So basically separate that. It's kind of how it is currently on live, and if you want to make it into a dot, you have the dot. If you want to make it into the stun, you have it over here into like the special effects, something like that. So you've got the choice: special effect maybe max range, or special effect won't be on this one, and instead you'll have dot max range. So maybe they could do it like that, but I reckon this needs revisiting. Now for Force Shock, this is a buff on the whole, so they basically increase the damage. They've also increased the chance to proc the elemental status effects, and they've also reduced the cost, so it's cheaper to use, does more damage, and it procs more effects. So this is just a buff all round. And then for Force Buff, they just made it ridiculously buffed. They basically increased the cleave, so the AoE part of it, if enemies are burning or chilled, etc. And they basically take 172% more damage. So before they'll take like 4,000 damage on the tooltip, now it would be like 9,000 damage tooltip. So quite a big increase to the actual damage. As for Pulsar, Pulsar's been nerfed, so now it's 7 seconds rather than 30 seconds. And it does go up to 10 seconds, but in all honesty, 30 seconds was just overkill, so that was kind of needed. The damage is still dreadful though, so I don't see many people run this. I run it on my bomb builds sometimes, but other than that it's very hit and miss. It does have a greater chance of applying different status effects though, but again it's not really going to be used. And the Wall of Elements has been nerfed. Basically they've increased the duration but reduced the damage per tick, so in PvP this is a direct nerf, because obviously if you're doing less damage you have less burst, you're not going to kill people. With that said, Unstable Wall of Elements has been buffed because the explosion is now 94% larger, so that's going to be a decent AoE there. So you can actually use this and get some explosion there. So if you play some Magical Draognknights, you may want to use Unstable Wall of Elements instead of Wall of Elements or Elemental Blockade, because it's going to have more burst, so you can kind of line up your leap when this goes off as well to have more burst. And if you're really good and coordinated, you could probably line up with Draw Essence as well. So like Draw Essence, Fossilize, Leap, and you'd have all of that go off at once and they'll probably die. And then the last sort of big changes are the restoration staff, and then there's a few minor things just to mention. And these are all controversial, these restoration staff changes, because they're going to change how Zergs and group play is in PvP, which I think is good. It's going to be more healthy for the game, allowing smaller scales groups and sort of 1vx people to actually perform better than they used to, so that's always nice and welcomed, and will help stop people sort of crutching on just having a healer next to them. So for Blessing and Protection, they've just reduced the cost, made the hill slightly bigger, but the hill's so low it's not going to be worth running in all honesty. Combat Prayer maybe if you want to give Berserk to your group, but that's pretty much it. That said, you can't give it to pets anymore, so yeah. And then as for Full Size Siphon, they've changed this slightly, so it's completely free to use now, like a debuff skill should be. They've also changed the duration, so it's now up to 24, and it'll go all the way up to 30 once it's fully leveled up, which is good. They don't aggro on you anymore, and then when you cast it and the target you hit then is kind of damaged, you would then get minor expedition, so this way just gives people a bit more movement in PvP, and that's always welcome in my eyes. Now as for Grand Healing, this has been nerfed in all honesty. It does last longer, which is good, but you can only have one of them down at once. That's the nerf there, and then on top of that it also has less healing per tick. So it does smaller heals, it does last longer, but it does smaller heals, and it can only have one down at a time. So all in all, you're only going to be getting about 12 to 1300 heals in PvP from this per tick for 8 seconds. Whereas before you could have 3 or 4 of these and get 4,000 or 5,000 health per tick or per second. So this is just going to be nowhere near as good as it used to be. The Healing Springs has also been morphed as well. So the Magicka Restore is not 330 for each person you hit, but rather it's 30 Magicka per ally you hit whilst they're inside the thing. And then basically, when you obviously get to 6 targets for the duration, you actually get more Magicka overall, but it's harder to obtain, so that's generally a nerf. And then obviously for this morph, obviously it increases the duration, so it makes it even longer. So all in all, basically it's cheaper to use, but it doesn't heal as much, so this isn't going to be that great in PvP. So if you're a healer in PvP, you may want to change this for something else and go for more bursty type heals. With that said, if you're a small scale, and obviously you don't have access to this, you don't have a healer, this will make it easier for you to fight large groups that do, because their healers won't be as effective as they were in the past. Now for regeneration, this has been buffed heavily, and this is quite nice. It's a welcome change, and obviously this has been buffed as well as vigor, so don't worry if you're a stamina user. Okay, they basically just doubled the duration, the heal of this, but reduced the duration. They also reduced the number of people it can hit, so it can hit one ally. It doesn't specify whether that's one ally as in the caster, or whether that's the caster and one ally. So just obviously bear that in mind, that it might be limited to just yourself. It could be you and one person. They've also increased the cost to kind of sort of update the fact that it now heals faster. And a rapid regen is really good, and this is almost like the intensive mender from the Necro. So basically this just doubles the frequency and halves the duration. So rather than this being every second for 10 seconds, this is now every half second for 5 seconds. So this just means you get so much more healing really fast, which makes sense to the skill. So if you have like a 16k rapid regen currently on live, you'll basically get that 16k healing over 5 seconds. Obviously in PvP that's like 8,000, but that's still really good. Now for mutagen, that's obviously been changed. The burst heal has been increased largely, so it's now 93% stronger. The downside with mutagen, as obviously lots of people might know, is when the targets are on low health. So if you're on low health and you have mutagen on yourself, 9 times out of 10 you'll die before the mutagen proc can actually go off, because you don't have the health pool to kind of allow for that proc to actually get applied. So yeah, it's not particularly great, so I would recommend rapid regen next patch if you do run obviously regeneration. Okay, And then as for the ward, steadfast ward, that's been changed, and it's quite nice, the change. They've increased the shield by 14%, but they've reduced the scaling to 100% so it doesn't get ridiculously big. So you won't have shields that are like 12 or 13k just from this skill alone, but instead they'll be around sort of 5,000-6,000, which is kind of what you'd expect. With that said though, they've obviously changed healing wood, and now healing wood is really viable. You don't need to wait until the end of the shield in order to get the heal. As the shield is on you, every second it's on you, you get 25% of the shield strength in the heal for every second. So if you put this on and then another shield, you'll be getting basically 25% healing of that shield strength, so like 1 to 2,000 healing every second, which is really good. And the fact it lasts like 6 seconds or something, it's going to be way more viable for magic builds to actually have this once again rather than ward ally, which people switch to. And then obviously for light armour, they've obviously changed the light armour shield. They've basically made it not as good, so it's smaller. And the harness magic is just terrible, so I would highly recommend using dampen magic next patch. I will test this, but I can't see this being any use in all honesty. The one thing I will say is that because they've taken away that 3% of your max resource, the sort of 40k plus magicka builds, they were getting anywhere from 1,200 to 1,400 magicka back per hit. And obviously what that meant is that you could basically pay for the skill if you were fighting other magicka users, so a magicka user could just keep this on indefinitely against another magicka user. Whereas now it doesn't work like that, and you're going to probably be getting anywhere from 300 to 400 back, so you're going to get about 20 to 40% of the cost rather than sort of 80 to 100%. With that said, you can obviously get the return on any damage. So there is something, I guess, so it's on any damage. So you can use this against stamina, but in all honesty, I'd probably try dampen magic. I think that's going to work better next patch, just based on my sort of understanding of the game. For medium armor, they've seen evasion that's been buffed heavily, which is wonderful. It's been needing a buff for a while, especially shuffle. So it's cheaper to use, which is great. Lasts longer, which is great. You get major expedition, which is awesome. And then obviously when you are hit by an AoE, that's where you get the major expedition. So you got some form of getting some more movement, which is nice when you need it. So particularly good for Nightblades. Elude, you don't really generally use that in PvP in all honesty, because shuffle has been improved so much more. But basically, shuffle is now a second rather than 0.5 per piece of medium armor. So you can have a minimum of 5 seconds immunity, which means obviously medium armor builds can actually run shuffle now and not have to be forced to use forward momentum, because obviously the benefits you get on shuffle is just so much better. So yeah, medium armor is way more viable than it used to be now. As for heavy armor, they've obviously changed the skill slightly. Basically, when you get the skill on you, you become obviously CC immune, but you are now snared, so you got 65% movement speed. With that said, the one morph obviously makes that even more, but you can block more damage. So this lets you block more damage, but you obviously have a greater snare. Whereas this one, obviously, as you have it, increases the cost reduction and the break free of that cost reduction. So the more pieces you have, the cost reduction goes up, so the break free becomes cheaper and cheaper, but that's only when you have your armor buffs active, so just bear that in mind. All in all, if you're a tank, probably run this one. It's probably better, makes you pretty much unkillable, because you can have 80% sort of block mitigation quite easily on most builds now, so yeah, that's going to be a thing. You can have permanent block tanks, which will be horrible to fight against. As for Soul Magic's been nerfed heavily. That's particularly Soul Assault. As for Soul Trap, that's been buffed. So Soul Strike has been nerfed, as it doesn't do all of its damage over 2.9 seconds, but rather 5 seconds, so it just means that it's not as bursty as it used to be. They haven't said whether Soul Assault is the same. I imagine it is, so I imagine Soul Assault is going to be 6 seconds, and this will be 5 seconds, so all in all, this is going to be a nerf to burst, which is not great. There's also a slight issue, which I don't think's been caught by the devs yet, but basically Soul Strike lasts 5 seconds now. The reveal from this for people going into Cloak is 2.9 seconds. So my concern is, if you cast it, can the person cloak mid Soul Assault? And if they can, then that's not going to be great. If it's 2.9 seconds after Soul Assault was finished, then that's fine. They've also increased the cost to 175, so it's really expensive now for an ultimate. So you're going to find this is going to be used probably less in PvP in all honesty than it used to be, because it's not as bursty and it's more expensive. And the damage isn't really going to be warranted, because it just can't do anything whilst you're channeling it. So yeah, this kind of puts it on par with Rapid Fire now from the Blister, from the bow skill, sorry. Then Shatter Soul, that does what it did before, but basically when the effect ends, it just explodes, doing AoE damage to everybody rather than just on yourself, just if the person dies, sorry. So this kind of always works now when whereas before it's very situational, but again, you're not really going to use the skill in PvP. Soul Trap's been buffed very heavily, which is very interesting. It now does 161% more damage, so it's now a proper damage over time ability. And if you're Magicka, you obviously get all your scaling. If you're Stamina, it also scales with your physical damage now. So if your physical damage is high, it will scale with your physical damage and Stamina. And Magic, it would obviously scale the other way, so that makes it viable for both builds. So I expect to see this on Magic builds. So that Magicka Warden that I'm thinking of running this, obviously with some other damage over time abilities, because you can have some really nasty dots now, which is going to be wonderful. And the Consuming Trap's been buffed, giving you a little bit more max resource return when the person dies. As for the Vampire, they basically made Bat Swarm cheaper to use, but they made Devouring Swarm more expensive and Cloud and Swarm more expensive, so all in all, nerfs to their damage. They have, however, made the Bat Swarms scale properly, so if you are a Stamina user, you can actually use them now, so they will scale with your highest resource and so on, and your crit and stuff, so it means you can actually use the bats if you'd like to as a Stamina DPS, whereas before you couldn't. And obviously being a good AoE that heals you is quite nice, so this might be good to use to push into people if you want, say, like a Stamina Sorcerer that doesn't want to use Dawnbreaker. Cloud and Swarm still pretty terrible. The only difference is you can now teleport around a couple more times, so it's more of a novelty, doesn't do enough damage, so yeah. The feed from the Vampire skill, that's obviously had its 1 second delay taken away, and it does damage as soon as you cast it now, and does damage per tick every second. They've reduced the damage overall by 11% to kind of reflect this, but overall, because of the changes, it's going to have an 89% damage increase, so this is again a nice dot. It cannot be dodged. It will stun people if they can be CC stunned. And then the morphs will obviously heal you like they did before, but it's going to be a slight nerf, and it's going to be about 5% less healing per tick than it was before. As for the Accelerating Drain, this basically increases the damage and healing of this ability does. So rather than giving you a movement speed boost, it does basically the damage and the healing are faster, and you basically get 1 more tick effect damage and healing as a result. So again, this will be a slight damage buff for this, but a nerf to movement. Mistform's been nerfed, but buffed in other ways. So it's been buffed in the sense that it's cheaper to use. It's now always 4 seconds. The ability ranks up in cost reduction now, so it gets even cheaper. The problem that I have is obviously when you use it, you get Major Expedition. If you left Mistform, you would still keep Major Expedition for a second or so if you animation cancelled it. Now they kind of fixed that, so as soon as you cast it, if you then carried on sprinting as you left Mistborn, you'd have like an extra second of just higher movement speed. That's been changed now, so you don't. So those people who run Templars and use Mistform, when you cast Mistform, it means that you're going to have to cast it and then cast it probably a second time to get away before you heal, rather than cast it, run, heal. So just bear that in mind, okay? And the second one isn't particularly great, so yeah, I won't see people using that. Werewolf on the whole has been nerfed, so generally skills are more expensive, but damage is higher per skill. So obviously that's kind of swings and roundabouts there. They've made the healing from the werewolf less as well, so the werewolves won't be as tanky because they can't heal as often or as effectively as they did because their skills are more expensive and the heal is less effective, so that's a nerf to survivability. The claws have also been nerfed but buffed in the same time, so they do more damage per hit. So ideally, if you can get more damage out, because the heal is based on the damage done from the claws, you'd obviously then get more healing, but it depends on if you can actually afford to keep it going. The Howl is a little bit cheaper to use, which is nice. The Howl of Agony obviously lets you do more damage against the person who's feared, and it's 33%, so that way you can really pick one target out, so that's always good. Pounce now does its proper sort of stuff. It actually has proper AoE damage, and it's a bit more expensive as you can see, but then up here, but then this one's obviously cheaper to use. The Pounce is cheaper to use. As for Roar is obviously increased. It can now fear people like it did before, but it's only up to 6 meters, not 8, so that's a nerf there, so less of radius. It does have a higher duration though, so that's a buff there. The Roar obviously applies fracture to people nearby, whether they are feared or not, so that's obviously a buff. It now works properly. And then the other morph of it obviously increases the cost reduction, making it cheaper to use. So if you go with Deafening Roar, which a lot of people did, you won't actually have a cheap skill, you'd have quite an expensive skill. So all in all, this is going to be harder to sustain. As for the Werewolf transformation itself, this has been nerfed, so light attacks and heavy attacks do less damage on the whole. They have, however, increased the radius of them, the range, so you can actually attack people further away, so 2 meters and then 3 meters extra. And then this is kind of to make it easier to kind of take into account that you're large, so you should be able to hit further than most people can. And then they've nerfed the pack leader more heavily, so in PvP this will not be used anymore. I can't see. So basically the pack leader now have the wolves appear, but they are untargetable, so they can't be targeted, meaning they cannot absorb damage for you like they used to be able to. The damage has also been nerfed as well. The damage has been reduced anywhere from sort of 30 to 60%, so generally less damage on the wolves. They can't be hit, which means they can't take damage for you. So yeah, and the bleed version of the werewolf morph, obviously that gives you 25% more bleed damage, which you kind of like. I have wolves that can't hit, they don't always target the people that I want. Yeah, the only benefit is the wolves do give maim to targets, so if you are fighting one-on-one this might be useful, but I see most people running this next patch. As for Fighters Guild, they've just fixed a few bugs and they've changed Circle Protection heavily, which I think is quite nice, and now it's viable and it's actually useful. So one morph obviously makes the undead things still stay there, but this time if they're an enemy, so enemy in the area will get feared. So it's a bit like the Magic and Nightblade's fear that they can put on the floor, so that's now viable for stamina users. On top of it, it also gives you the minor protection just for having it, so if you're inside it you get minor protection, and you get minor endurance if you stand inside the little area. And then what I think is nice is Ring of Preservation. It actually is a heal. So rather than giving that stupid roll dodge thing, which people didn't really use, it heals people. It doesn't specify how big the heal is, but it's based on the AoE heal over time standards. So I would recommend or sort of expect people to achieve kind of the same sort of healing as grand healing. So that's kind of what I would anticipate from this skill here. Dawnbreaker's been nerfed on the whole, but buffed in other ways. So as I said earlier, when you cast a skill, there's an animation that has to play now. It's a very short animation, but it does have to play. They've increased the damage of the dots, so that's a buff there. So nerf to animation, buff to damage. They've also removed the 6 target cap, so obviously that is a buff. So you've got buff, nerf, buff, which is good. So nerf, buff, buff. They have, however, changed this. So if you're on Nightblade and using like a bow gank build, before you could swap the Flawless Dawnbreaker for an extra 5% damage, which gave you like 2 to 400 damage in stealth, which is great. Now you can't, because it only gives you 300 damage when you actually cast the skill, the ultimate. So meaning if you have it slotted on your bar, you only get the Fighting Guild passives, not the actual extra 5%. So this might not be worth running as on certain builds. As for the Dawnbreaker of Smiting, this is obviously seen a damage increase, but because of all the changes and everything, it's actually a 1% damage loss overall. So as you can see, Dawnbreaker is not going to be as good as it used to be, but it's still going to be viable. Expert Hunter, that's been changed slightly, so now it's kind of more applicable. So basically when you have it, rather than reducing the cost of stamina for Fighter's Guild abilities, it increases the damage instead. So that's quite nice. So obviously instead it grants up to 25% damage dealt with non-ultimate Fighter Guild abilities. So if you're using Silver Bolts, which obviously become the spammable for the skill line now, you can obviously gain 25% more damage, which is awesome. The Hunt has been changed as well, so rather than getting the Berserk from attacking from stealth, you just need to attack from the side, but it does have to be critical damage, so it's going to be hard to proc. And the duration is only 5 seconds, so you're probably going to drop this in all honesty. That's not really worth running it anymore. Silver Bolts, that's now spammable, as I've said, so you can now cast this more frequently. It does more damage, it's cheaper to use. It doesn't snare people though. The morphs obviously do bring that back in if you would like. So 1 morph Silver Shards. This obviously lets you hit other people. So this now hits all enemies around your target and there's no cap on it, which is good. The AoE damage dealt is 25% weaker than the initial hit. So if you hit someone for 1000, you'll then do 750 damage on the AoE rather than 50. So that's kind of a buff there, so that's good. It's a little bit more damage there. And the AoE now ranks up 1% per rank, so just generally this will do more damage than it used to. As for Silver Bolts, they've decreased the damage of this, they've increased the cost, and they've added the snare onto this morph, so that way you can still get the snare if you want, but you can't obviously use it as a spam ball as easily, so it's more of a gap closer to try and get closer to people, okay? And then Trap Beast, that's been changed slightly, so rather than sit on the floor for ages, it sits on the floor for a couple seconds. Force is still applied to you though, and it doesn't renew as like it used to. So that's kind of that there. As for Mage's Guild, Entropy's been redesigned to be a proper damage over time now. So before it was kind of this weird heal dot thing that didn't really do anything. So they've increased the cost to kind of reflect this now a damage over time, so there's a nerf because it's expensive. It does still give you Major Sorcery though, so you still have access to it. It doesn't have the heal over time, so that's a nerf. The damage though is 220% higher, so that's a massive buff. The duration is 10 seconds. And obviously that's with the Everlasting passive and so on. The Major Sorcery stays at 20 seconds. So all in all, this is now a damage over time ability. It's actually going to be comparable to something like Destructive Touch next patch, or to Fletcher Infection from the Warden. So this is now, again, you can use this as a dot build. As for Structured Entropy, when you have this, it gives you heals every 2 seconds. So this obviously can introduce the heal back rather than being RNG. And then Degeneration, this instead of being RNG, is now a Magicka sustain tool. So this is a really good buff. So I can see many builds running Degeneration next patch, because it's a really good damage over time ability, and it gives you Magicka back. So you get 100 Magicka back for 10 seconds, that's 1000 Magicka back, and it's going to cost not a particular amount, like particularly expensive amount, 2,700. So all in all, this is just a really good way to get damage in for very little cost. So this is a good change. Equilibrium, that's been changed, so it's just a little bit cheaper to use and easy to use, but all in all, it's not going to be used in PvP. So yeah. Fire Rune's been changed. Scalding Rune just has a bigger damage over time now per tick. The Volcanic Rune, the bit that stuns people, that basically just, rather than doing how it scaled before, so increasing the duration of the stun, it just has cost reduction. But again, you're not really going to use those. Meteor's been changed and buffed on the whole, so it's got no target cap anymore, so you can hit multiple people at once. It does obviously have some issues, so obviously people can still see it like you could before. It does have a smaller damage over time ability component to it, so it's 13% weaker than it used to be. But the duration obviously is longer, so generally you kind of find it damage will be very similar. And then they've also fixed an issue that if you did cast it when you died, it will still do damage to the person. And then Ice Comet, they've basically taken away the snare from this and instead just increased the damage. So basically, you just get more and more damage with this one, so there'll be a big damage difference between Ice Comet and Shooting Star. So in PvP, I expect people to run Ice Comet. With that said though, if people are still being vampires and there's a high proportion of vampires in PvP, you might be happy with Shooting Star because of the fire damage to them. Now for the Stygic Order, obviously they've just nerfed Meditate, so this isn't as strong as it used to be, meaning that when you cast it you don't get as much healing back. So it does kind of make it more balanced, because there are times where people could just meditate and if your DPS wasn't high or your low resource, you couldn't actually get them out of it, and then they'll generally heal up and kill you. So that hasn't happened to myself, but I've seen people die to it, so that kind of makes it easier for newer players. As for Undaunted, nothing particularly changed here for PvP. It just scales correctly now, which is nice, and the synergies now works properly. It scales obviously on the target's critical strike chance, so whether that's weapon crit or spell crit, so it's just more reliable basically. Generally will crit more frequently than it did. As for Bone Shield, this is just it's more expensive to use, but when you actually factor in the cost reduction, because it wasn't having that before, it's now cheaper to use, so that's nice. So generally cheaper to use, that's good. The shield is slightly bigger than it used to be. The damage return from the spiked Bone Shield is higher, so obviously you've got 27% increase there, which is great. And then again, it's bigger shield if you go for the other morph. The downside is the synergy of it is now a lot less. It's a 30% shield rather than 50, but it does hit 6 people, not 4, so that's a buff indirectly. So all in all, bigger shield for yourself, smaller shields for allies, but you can hit more allies with it. It does cost more to use though. As for Inner Fire, that's just a tanking skill, so you won't really use that in PvP. Necrotic Orb, that's obviously been nerfed, you can only have one out at a time, so that's not as good as it used to be, and they've also reduced healing, so generally this is just nerfed, so you're not going to see this often in PvP now. Radiates, you don't really see that. Spawn Broodlings, you're not going to use those synergies. Trapping Webs, you're not really going to use it, the damage just isn't high enough really, and it's a bit clunky to use. As for Alliance War, this is where some big changes have happened. So Cow Drops is now cheaper to use. The snare has been reduced though, and they've also reduced the damage per tick by 60%, so this is just a big snare rather than a damage ability. Then obviously one morph obviously ranks up, and it makes sure that you don't obviously get any extra sort of damage when it ranks up, but instead get more time. So this obviously just gives you more time. And the second one obviously just gives major fracture to enemies with the dot, but again, because of its obviously damage reduction now, it's not going to be used too often unless for mobility thing. As for Magicka Detonation, that's been buffed ridiculously, so this is now going to make bombing once more viable when the Elder Scrolls Online, which is great. It really helps counter Zergs. So before it take 1.5 seconds, now it's a 1 second cast time, which is great. It's got a 7% increase in damage, so it makes it more damagey. It's cheaper to use, and they've also removed the target cap, so that way you can basically scale up to 250% easily, and they might have even changed that on the tooltip to go indefinitely. I don't know if they've done that yet, but all in all, this is going to be more damage. So this is just better group, sort of anti sort of Zerg play basically. Rapid maneuver is pretty much the same as it was generally, so I won't worry too much about that. Vigor, this is the big change for stamina DPS. So what you'll find is that the Vigor is now only on yourself, and you have two options, okay? So the base skill Vigor is for yourself, and Resolve Vigor is for yourself. So rather than being able to heal your other people with Vigor, you can only heal yourself, but the heal is much stronger than it used to be. So it's now 10 seconds from 5 seconds, but they've decreased the tick frequency to 2 seconds from 1 second. So basically, it's going to heal you very similar, but over more time, and the heal is obviously much stronger. So generally, you're going to get slightly bigger heals for a longer period of time, all in all giving you more healing power. And obviously the Resolving Vigor obviously then amplifies this even further, so it's going to be very similar to like regeneration from the restoration stuff. So basically being able to give you the tooltip of Vigor over like 5 seconds, so you get like a sort of 16k heal over 5 seconds. It's going to be really strong, rather than getting that. So it kind of just makes it viable, so it'll be very similar to live, but just every second rather than every 2. As for Echoing Vigor, this is your AoE morph, so if you did want to retain that, I'm going to heal my allies as well as me with it, then obviously you have to use this morph now. You cannot go with Resolving Vigor like you did before, sit in a ball with everybody having this and putting out stupid heals. Instead, you now have to go with this. Warhorn's been buffed, which is quite nice. So Sturdy Horn now gives critical resistance, so this is going to be good on tanks and PvP. So it might be worth having a tank or a healer run this, so when a group pushes into you, you cast this, and then you reduce the critical damage your group takes by 15%, which is always good. Then as for the support, barriers again has been buffed, and this is a nice change, so it now can hit more people. So sort of 12 people can get hit, so again this is more for slightly larger groups or mini Zergs. And then this obviously does have its healing reduced because it's obviously a shorter duration. So the duration is now 15 seconds from 30, but they've increased the frequency. So all in all, it basically makes the healing slightly less, but it's over obviously a shorter period of time, so there's more counterplay to it. Because it hits more people, you can kind of do this as a preemptive push. Somebody could cast this, or you could then run into another group with obviously a really big shield on you and a good heal over time on you, and then drop your ults. So this is kind of good for a sort of group play and small scale. As for the barrier that restores resources, they've taken away the conditional, and you just get a flat magicka back at rank 4, so flat 1000 magicka back. Not particularly worth it. The ultimate is also reduced as well, so again not particularly worth it either. So I reckon most people are going to run Revive and Barrier over replenishing. It's just not worth it now. Guard's been buffed, it's just cheaper to use overall. Purge, that's kind of stayed the same. It's been nerfed somewhat though, so when you cast Purge now, you take away 2 effects, and then what happened in live is you take away 2 effects, and any other effect on you is reduced by 50%. So basically made dots and stuff a lot less potent against you. What they've done now is take away that last part, so you can only purge them, and then the dots do the full damage if they're still on you. And instead they've increased the number of dots to 3. The problem is it's still expensive, so it's got a base of 7,830, it's just way too expensive. Efficient is now 5,400, so again they've basically increased the cost of purge, so I don't see people running this anymore, it's too expensive. As for cleanse, this has been buffed, so if you are able to afford this, this is a nice buff. Every effect you remove, you heal 7 to 10% of their max health, so 10% if you max it. Obviously, if you take away 2 effects, you get 20%, which is more than the 15% that was originally there, so that's good. And because you now have access to 3, you can actually get an extra 10% on top, so you can almost double this 15% heal compared to what it was, so this is a nice buff. But again, the skill's too expensive. Flare's been nerfed heavily. I don't think anybody's going to run it next patch. It's now 5,400. It only lasts 5 seconds. It's just ridiculously expensive. The Lingering Flare, just like it sits on the floor longer than it did. Scorching Flare, rather than damaging the target, it stuns them when they are in stealth. So if they're in stealth and you hit them with it, they get stunned, so that way you've got a chance to get to them. But it's just too expensive. As for Siege Shield, that's kind of stayed the same on the whole. Only difference is that one morph now also protects your siege, so good for Cyrodiil, but it's more of a bug fix, to be honest. It does, however, affect 12 people rather than 6, so again that's enough buff, sorry. And it's also got a cost reduction, which is also a buff, so it's a lot cheaper to use. Now, down here, a couple sets have been changed, which are really important to mention, so we're going to run through these quick, and then we're going to wrap it up, kind of just saying kind of general things to take away from this patch coming. And so they've Bloody Mara has now just been nerfed slightly, so that's not there. The bashing glyphs now actually give weapon and spell damage to your bash rather than just weapons. That's a bug fix. So that means if you're a magic necromancer and you use the Goliath ult with the bash, you can actually use it because that scales all of your magic stats now properly. So that's an option. As for sets that have been changed, that are kind of worth mentioning. Everything's kind of pretty much the same in all honesty. The only ones that I kind of did notice was defensive position. This basically doesn't give you as much magic restore if you don't actually absorb the projectile. So before you could cast as and almost use this like Dark Deal on any build, so that was quite nice, but now you can't, so that's a nerf. Ebon's been nerfed slightly, but nothing massive. Fix a bug with the Eternal Hunt with the rune. Fix the bug there. They've actually increased this, so now this lasts 5 seconds rather than 3, so you now get Major Berserk for a bit longer. Ice Furnace have actually fixed this, and now it's got spell damage rather than weapon damage for the 4th piece. All of these are kind of mainly PvE changes. Merciless Charge, they've actually changed this, so increase the amount of damage ticks by 1, so it gives you basically 20% more damage. This is now a better sort of thing to get. They've nerfed Plague Doctor, so he's got less health. Again, down here is relatively the same. They've obviously changed it slightly so it moves a little bit, and it's a bit more quicker to actually do its stuff. Torix Pact's been nerfed, so it doesn't work on Oblivion enchants. Other than that, it's the same. So it means that you can't just go and increase your Oblivion damage because there's a cap on it now. So if you use Torix Pact, use elemental glyphs like Shock, Fire, or Frost, or use something like the Vampire and Undead glyph to turn Danger on. Twin Slashes, that's been changed, so increase the damage of time from the set by 67%, but the dot now happens, so that's just been changed. And Fellow Drift can only hit one target, hit the target once rather than multiple times, so that's just like nerf indirectly. And the big change is to with Fury, which loads of people wear. It's quite a popular set. Now they're basically taking the proc of taking damage to now, taking the proc from it being critical damage to just any damage. So that's nice. It means it's easy to proc, which is good. They've reduced the duration to 5 seconds, so it's a little harder to keep up. They've reduced the stacking bonus, so you can only go every half second, whereas before it was every second, but you could get like 3 or 4 stacks per second, so there's a slight nerf there. And they've reduced the number of stacks to 20 from 250, so again that's a 150 weapon damage reduction. But once you hit the 20 stacks, that then doubles, so you then get a 10-second duration. So you get when you get to obviously max stats, you have 10 seconds to keep the stacks on, so you can have a higher uptime. But with that said, obviously you have less weapon damage than you did in live. And that's kind of that really. Nothing particularly useful down here. So sort of to take away from this patch is there's going to be loads of changes, and loads of sweeping changes to the weapon skill lines, all of which I think are good. On the whole, they basically make restoration staffs more purposeful. They kind of do what they should be doing now, so healing people. There's changes to stamina, make stamina more sort of balanced in comparison to Magicka, so stamina have good heals now. They've got Vigor, which is now in line with regeneration. They've also addressed some of the issues with some of the sets that have been a bit sort of overtuned, like Fury and 7th Legion and Ravager. So all in all, what you'll find next patch is the kind of the maximum damage that stamina users have been pushing out as of late will drop slightly, and that in turn would obviously mean that Magicka users can then go less tanky and go to more damagey again. So you'll find Magic users will probably be easier to attack and kill because they're going to go for more damage trying to fight the Stam users, and the Stam users will probably go less tanky because their damage isn't as high, so people are going to try and sort of offset one another in that. So there we have it, guys. That's kind of the patch that's coming up. Obviously it's a very long patch notes, and obviously if you have stuck around this long, obviously well done to you guys. I do appreciate it, but it's quite a good patch. It's something I'm actually quite excited about. Normally I see patches, I'm like, oh no, I've got to rebuild my whole class, but actually looking through the changes here, there isn't anything particularly dramatic. That said, obviously if you play a stamina DPS and you use something like Fury or 7th Legion, or some of the really overtuned sets in my opinion, you are then going to find you are being nerfed. However, on the whole, you'll find that I think the classes, from looking at the skills and the changes to the weapon skill lines particularly, will be more balanced. There are some issues, as I said, with the stun from destructive touch, but all in all I think it's quite a promising patch and should help sort of alleviate the overhealing that we're seeing in PvP currently, both in Battlegrounds and in Cyrodiil, and it should also allow for more build fight sort of variety, because the kind of sets like Fury and 7th Legion for stamina won't be meta anymore, because obviously there'll be alternatives that might be just as good, and then it just makes it more viable. There won't be that much of a discrepancy between Fury and, say, Hunting's Rage. So with that kind of said, I'm going to obviously shoot off, and if you've got any questions about the patch, or kind of you think, oh, I'd really like to have this test or that test, or what do you think of this, Dan, just pop them in the comments. Obviously I'll reply to you as quick as I can. But yeah, I hope you enjoy this, and obviously I appreciate all the support for the channel. Obviously we're doing really well, considering we've only been going just over a month, and I'll catch you in the next video. Take care, and thanks for watching. Bye.